So you want me to review a comic book?
Yes.
Is this because me and Pony Fanboy reviewed that Zootopia comic not too long ago?
Well, kind of.
Alright, what's the big theme of the comic then? Is it religious themed, political themed? Is there sentient food in it?
Well, okay, that's the thing. It's about,
What is the name of this comic book anyway?
oh, it's called Marville.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. This guy can't even do a comprehensive video game review, and you expect him to review something as terrible as Marville all on his own?
Well, Wiz, you see, I was going to...
I mean, come on, man. Why can't I review Marville? I haven't done something like that since the Sonichu and My Immortal days. I'm sorry, what the heck is a Marville? Considered one of the worst comic books ever made that isn't part of a pre-established property.
Okay, you know what? How about this? You can both review it together, alright? Wiz, you seem more than eager to want to rip this thing apart. And Chris, it kind of falls in line with your criteria, so yeah. Can I please trust you guys to review this together?
Yes, sir.
Great. Perfect. Best of luck, boys. You're gonna need it.
Welcome to a top soapbox where bad comics burn. Chris is gonna teach you all a lesson you shan't learn. Poe Town is not the smartest, who made Mr. Pickle's not an artist. Anything that he finds offensive, it'll be your turn. Chris Cara, he is a man, punch, wears a furry hat. Chris Cara. Harry is a wizard. Wait, what's up with that? Chris Cara. Obama, robots, Mexico and trucks. Chris Cara. This comic sucks. Chris Cara.
So, what exactly is the story behind this again?
Well, okay, the history of Marville is as follows. In the 90s, comic book sales were slowly declining, mainly because a lot of people felt that superhero comics didn't really hold the same kind of stint like they did back in the Golden Age. With this decline, companies like Marvel were eventually going to hit bankruptcy, until three Marvel higher-ups made a bet saying that they could make a comic that could potentially save the company, and this resulted in the You Decide contest. Those three higher-ups being Peter David, who worked on several Captain Marvel comics, Joe Quesada, before he went ahead and made One More Day, and Bill Jemas, the guy responsible for today's comics, Marville. The comic was originally intended to be a parody of superhero comic cliches and tropes, but soon it became a pseudo-philosophical mess that attempted to explain the meaning of life, religion, evolution, and the sort. And I guess that's why we're doing this for your show, Chris.
What? I'm sorry, I wasn't listening.
Right, let's just get on with it. This is Marville, and no, we don't have physical copies of the other issues past issue 1 because, well, the prices are jacked up on eBay, and in a lot of ways it's kind of like Sonichu. It's better to have the copy of the first issue on handy and not waste your resources on the other crappy issues.
Issue 1 of the comic focuses on the future year of 5002 AD, where the Earth has been renamed AOL and it seems that the Marvel Comic Company has rose from the ashes after its bankruptcy and eradicated its competition. Also, it seems Ted Turner and Jane Fonda are the ones ruling the world, hence why they renamed the planet after one of his companies, AOL.
You see, this is the future the liberals want. Get it? AOL. It's like Krypton, but with AOL slapped in front of it. Way to date yourself, comic, because let's face it, just a couple years after this comic came out, nobody gave a damn about AOL. Much like Superman, the home planet of the main character is going to be destroyed, in this case with a meteor shower, which seems like it shouldn't be too hard to stop considering Ted Turner just karate chops one of the things in two. Nevertheless, Turner and Fonda, who, need I remind you, divorced a year before this comic came out by the way, want to send their son back in time so that he can survive. Their son being named Kal AOL. Get it? Kal AOL, like Kal-El, Superman's birth name, but with AOL slapped in it. Get it? And they send him back with a time machine made of Atari and PlayStation parts, which, believe me, is going to be one of the less convoluted things in the story. Once Al and his dog end up in New York City in the year 2002, the comic then turns into a fish-out-of-water story as he tries to figure out his own superpowers. You see, this is exactly why superhero stories are just so ridiculous. You know who is a real superhero without having to rely on superpowers all the time? Bible Man. Now that's a real superhero. He doesn't have to rely on special powers and whatnot. He just needs the power of believing in God. Batman doesn't have superpowers. Iron Man doesn't have superpowers. And yet they're still twice the superheroes that Bible Man could ever dream of being. Seriously, Media Wiz? Are you trying to imply that those superheroes are more impressive than Bible Man? Chris, do you really want me to answer that?
Also, why does he think that he would get superpowers from simply traveling back in time? It's not like his parents said the machine would do that or anything. Oh, that's right. These are humor comics, and apparently the characters in humor comics have to be ungodly stupid. It truly does feel like we're watching a Friedberg and Seltzer movie in comic book form. He befriends a cab driver named Mickey, and from there, Al keeps succeeding at doing superhero work without actually doing proper superhero work. First, he lets a bank robber get away, as he's given the reward money for catching the perpetrator after the man simply slips in a puddle of his dog's drool. And then later, he gets even more money for busting the same man who tries mugging them. Even though Al didn't do anything, and it was the robber getting knocked out by his dog's flatulence. By the way, they were at the bank to see if they could get money out of his account, but they couldn't because they haven't established the account yet. Why did they think that was going to work? And why is Alan Greenspan working at this bank? Yeah, if you couldn't already tell, this comic is not only spoofing Superman's origin story, but it's also parodying elements of Spider-Man with the bank robbery and a really crowbarred line referencing Uncle Ben's death, as well as a bit of Batman, since the attempted mugging was outside of a play and a dumb reference to the death of Bruce Wayne's parents. Anyway, the first issue ends with the planet not ending in the year 5002, and instead of just bringing Al home, his parents decide that they'll send him things back in time, like a new pair of underwear.
Huh. Well, that wasn't a very good comic, but, it must get better from here, right? Well, issue 2 is just as bad as issue 1, but once you get to issue 3 onward, it somehow gets even worse.
Issue 2 involves Al and Mickey trying to help bust some crime kingpin. Along the way, they befriend this undercover cop named Lucy, who becomes a main player later in the story. The issue also includes cameos from these terrible parodies of Batman, Iron Man, and Black Panther. Oh, and Spider-Man and the Punisher are just there helping take out the bad guys for whatever reason. Issue 2 also begins with an appearance from Rush Limbaugh, who has flatulence. This comic really likes using that for an easy laugh, don't they? And it also turns out that the big crime kingpin is the film director Spike Lee.
I'm sorry. What? Call me impatient if you must, but I thought this was a comic about religion or something like that. Well, when exactly does that come into the story? Issue 3 is where that all starts. And for some reason, issue 3 has the text in this weird overlay format over the images instead of just doing thought and speech bubbles like they did before. And it doesn't help that the art style changes in this issue as well, and then changes back to the original format in the later issues.
The story involves Al wanting to know about the meaning of life, more specifically why there's so much evil in the world. So they use the time machine to go back way before the world was even created, and they meet up with this guy named Jack, who may or may not be God, considering that he appears to them in 2 different forms. One as the average God depiction we usually see in media, as well as a giant superhero.
Okay, yeah. Do you remember Sonichu issue 10 when I reviewed that? There was that scene where Chris Chan spoke to God and Jesus directly. Yeah, this is up there with that. Congratulations, Marville. You are on Sonichu levels of suck.
From there, Jack shows them the creation of the world, including the very minuscule evolution of plant life and molecules, which Lucy begins to cry about since these non-sentient beings die off simply because humans do things like walk, or breathe, or clap.
Well, sorry to tell you this, Snowflake, but facts don't care about your feelings. Okay, implying that Marville and facts are in the same kind of logic just sickens me on so many levels.
I forgot to mention Jack shows them all of this while they're naked in the water, which is apparently a thing that he doesn't stop doing all throughout in the later issues. Anyway, issue 3 ends with them heading off to the time of the dinosaurs, or as they put it, the Jurassic Park. Instead of just calling it the Jurassic Period, like someone who would know a thing or two about basic science. And they never stopped calling it Jurassic Park in the following issues, even going as far as to say Jurassic Park wasn't just a movie, it was a tribute. And that's even assuming that they're even in the Jurassic period and not somewhere like the Cretaceous or Triassic period.
The dinosaurs actually lived in the Cretaceous period, not the Triassic period.
Oh, now, don't be silly. Everyone knows dinosaurs aren't real. They're just a lie made up by the atheist liberal media. Ha ha ha. Chris, sometimes you were literally too stupid to insult.
Issue 4 involves the gang ending up in Jurassic Park. The Jurassic period! As the gang travels forward, they place some Watcher with some microbes in it inside of Al's supersuit, and it evolves from a fish with legs to a duck-billed lizard creature that speaks. I believe that the proper pronunciation is a crocoduck, according to Kirk Cameron. As the majority of the comic goes down how these creatures are different from humans, how they don't kill off their own kind, how they have different biology, how humans are the only species to kill their own, if anyone was as smart as Albert Einstein, things wouldn't be that way, and how everything happens for a reason because it's God's will. Now, while I don't believe in dinosaurs, I completely agree that if they did, they died off because God wanted them to be eradicated.
Ignoring the blatantly obvious fact that humans and animals are different biologically, as well as the fact that humans aren't evil to their core and display traits like basic human decency, there's one thing about this comic that just stands out to me in the weirdest way.
The talking duck-billed dinosaur, which they nickname Snorts, comes to their aid after they get chased down by a herd of the creatures. Keep in mind, they only got chased because they ran instead of simply walking away from what are obviously herbivores, but these characters are idiots, so I'm not surprised that they did that. But this is what stands out to me. They're friends! They're part of the tribe! Mishbuka.
Now, if you didn't know this already, Mishbuka is apparently Hebrew. So what this comic is implying is that not only could dinosaurs speak, but they were Jewish. Jewish dinosaurs. Oy vey gewasch gewalt gefilte fish.
Issue 4 ends with the gangs taking an otter from this Jurassic Park, period, before leaving and seeing the dinosaurs die off. Animal life is introduced as they travel forward, as the otter evolves into a human. More specifically, a human with adamantium claws, an Australian accent, and donning the name Hugh Jackman.
That's right, Marville issue 5, Marville Originville, is implying that the first ever human being to ever exist was actually Wolverine from the X-Men, who evolved from an otter. But the first man to ever exist was Adam, and he didn't evolve from an otter. Oh, is this just now starting to sound crazy to you, Chris? Is this now leaving the realms of reality to you? Yeah. Comic, you had me and then you lost me.
The comic then goes down evolution about humans and how they crossbred with Homo sapiens and how humans invented war and division all on their own as the species evolved. And the best possible outcome is a world where everyone gets along and has sex with each other. Seriously, that's actually what they say in the comic. All the while saying things like, scientists aren't really scientific, and resort to calling non-believers morons. Or this odd exchange. But because you're showing me, I don't just understand, I believe. You got it, fangirl.
Wait, hold on. Fangirl? Yeah, I don't see it.
In a way, it's like this comic is accurately portraying modern political conversation and discourse, and that's absolutely terrifying to me. They also imply that Al, Mickey, and Lucy are going to be the ones that will save the world from a potential World War III. Somehow, I don't know. They don't even go into it that much. I know we're kind of skipping around a lot with these comics, but I will say this. They love using big words they clearly don't know the definitions of, and it's hilarious to see how much they think they're dropping truth bombs when in reality, this was released to the public and nobody was reading it. And there's a reason for that. Because it sucked. The end of issue 5 has our characters learning the meaning of life, that everything happens for a reason. Mickey finally believing in God when she didn't at the beginning of the story, and Jack gives this brief epilogue. God is part of the ant that carries food home. God is the part of you that works for a greater good. You can know what's the truth and not understand it just by feeling God within you.
Let me remind you that this statement also came from a comic that implied that the first ever human being to exist was Wolverine from the X-Men. Okay, that seems like a conclusion, but what could possibly happen in the last 2 issues of this series, then? Well,
Issue 6 is pretty much a lame recap of what happened in the previous 5 issues, with this stupid framework of Al trying to sell his adventures as well as his philosophical findings to this comic company, and it ends with the editor that he's pitching this to turning the comic down with a passive-aggressive slant to it, that the comic-reading public just wants silly superhero comics instead of mind-blowing and thought-provoking philosophy.
Oh yes, please, blame your audience, the comic-reading public. They're the reason that Marville failed financially. It's not because Marville sucked or anything. The same strategy is now practiced by companies like Sony and Disney whenever you don't like their film remakes, except you get the added bonus of being called a bigot if you don't like them.
And as for issue 7, it isn't even really a comic. It's just a giant open letter for how to potentially sell comic book ideas to Marvel, specifically through this offshoot they had at the time called Epic Comics Division, which may have been fine and good, but it died after a year. Whoops.
What else is there to even say? Marville is easily one of the worst comic books ever made. It's horribly written with its ham-fisted and preachy dialogue. All the characters are unlikable and stupid and annoying. The jokes are horrible, and it's just generally insulting to read, whether you're someone who believes in science and evolution or faith and religion, or if you're simply just a comic book reader or a comic book writer or a comic book artist or just a casual reader of comics. It's terrible.
Now, if you're not familiar with some of my Media Wiz stuff, this right here is the shelf of the worst. Usually what I do is I take some of the worst things I've ever done videos on, and I put them in this big collection, if you will. And I actually have some of the written media that I've talked about over the years to add to it as well. So we got Sonichu, the worst webcomic ever made. That's going on the shelf. And then we got, one of Hot Sauce's Clop Fix. That's definitely going in there. And then we have The Biggest Insult to Spider-Man with One More Day. And lastly, we get to add Marville to the collection as well, so there you go. I'm the Media Wiz, because one art form wasn't enough.
Yeah, exactly what he said. This comic is bad. Seriously, I don't know how to summarize it better than what he just said. This comic is very terrible. And may Jesus be with you.